The Trump administration is facing new questions about its plan to withdraw troops from Syria. This comes after National Security Advisor John Bolton appeared to set conditions for a pullout. Bolton told Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that the U.S. would not be leaving Syria until ISIS is destroyed and poses no more threat to the region. He also said, quote, "We don't think the Turks ought to undertake military action that's not fully coordinated with and agreed to by the United States at a minimum, so they don't endanger our troops." President Trump denied changes to his Syria plan. In a tweet, he wrote his intentions are, quote, "no different from my original statements. We will be leaving at a proper pace while at the same time continuing to fight ISIS and doing all else that is prudent and necessary." For more, National Security Correspondent David Martin joins me now from the Pentagon. David, in an op-ed in the New York Times, the president of Turkey said that the path to peace in Syria can be achieved through Turkey's leadership. Can Turkey accomplish that without the U.S.?
No. For one thing, if the Turkish military goes in while U.S.-backed forces are still in Syria, then you will have a confrontation between the Turkish military and the American military because the Turkish military wants to go after some of those same fighters who the U.S. is supporting because they view those fighters as terrorists. And even if they were to go in and not encounter any U.S. forces, Turkey has already told the U.S. they will need logistics assistance, intelligence help in order to conduct a cross-border operation. So Turkey is only going to be able to do this if it comes up with a plan first with the United States. And we know that National Security Advisor John Bolton is going to Turkey to discuss with Turkey's President Erdogan this whole complex problem of the Turks going in and the U.S. going out. But at the same time, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Joseph Dunford, will be in Turkey discussing these on-the-ground details in much greater detail with Turkish military leaders.
Well, Bolton suggested the U.S. will not leave until ISIS is destroyed, but the president has said ISIS has been defeated. So what is the Pentagon's assessment?
Well, this hinges on the difference between taking back all of the strongholds that ISIS still has in Syria, which would be seen perhaps as a military defeat of ISIS, but still leave thousands of would-be ISIS fighters on the loose in Syria, ready to join back up at the first sign that they could get away with it. So the term has always been to achieve the lasting defeat of ISIS. And to achieve the lasting defeat of ISIS, what you have to do is establish local security so that there is not the kind of chaos in local communities that ISIS feeds off that they could come back in and start up again. Providing local security means providing local security forces, police, militias, things like that, and that requires arming and training. And the U.S. is in the process of doing that. At last count, they'd armed and trained about 20% of the 40 or 50,000 policemen and militiamen they needed. So it's still a long way from setting the conditions that would produce what most people see as a lasting defeat of ISIS.
So then, David, what exactly is the timeline for pulling U.S. troops from Syria? Is it clear?
No, it's open-ended. We started this with the president giving the Pentagon a 30-day deadline. The Pentagon extended that with its plan to 4 months by showing the president that in order to get all the equipment out, in order to do it in an orderly manner so that it didn't look like a pell-mell retreat, you had to do it in much longer than 30 days. they began working on this 120-day timeline. But if the conditions are lasting defeat of ISIS, no threat to the U.S.-backed fighters from the Turkish military, and another condition which we haven't mentioned yet, which is no presence of Iranian-backed fighters in Syria, that's just a much longer proposition than 120 days.
So Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is also visiting the Middle East this week to reassure allies who are concerned about the U.S. decision to pull troops. Are military officials worried about having allies lose confidence in the U.S.?
Well, I think that's the biggest cost of this whole controversy. You can argue the merits of pulling out American troops from Syria. You can argue it pro and con. You can argue you should do it in 90 days. You could argue you can do it in 120 days. You can argue you could do it in 6 months. But I think everyone agrees, except perhaps the president, everyone agrees that to suddenly announce in the middle of battlefield operations that the U.S. forces are pulling out is just to leave your allies in the lurch, and also to make all of the U.S. officials who have been dealing with the allies in good faith on the proposition that this was going to be a long-term operation suddenly look like fools. So I think that is the single biggest cost of this whole controversy.
Real questions about the reliability of the United States as an international partner. David Martin, thank you very much, David.
Sure thing.